Generation after generation chases the carrot on the stick, but all they ever get is that stick shoved somewhere really painful. In part one of this series, we looked at 4 generations from the lost generation to boomers and how each one was promised stability, then discarded the moment that they aged out. Some got pensions, some got lawsuits, but very few of them got what they were sold. But those generations still believed in the dream, at least at first. Gen X was the first to grow up watching it all fall apart in real time. And every generation since, well, they've been handed a hollowed out version of that same promise, slicker, faster, and even easier to take away. Now we pick up with Gen X. They didn't start out cynical, they earned it. Gen X was born between 1965 and 1980, which means that they started hitting their 50s in the mid-2010s and are in it right now. These are the latchkey kids, the DIY generation, raised by boomers in sitcoms, and were told that if you just got a degree, kept your head down, and worked hard, you'd be just fine. They came of age in the shadow of Reaganomics. They watched their parents get laid off in the 80s, pensions completely disappear in the 90s, and job security morph into a myth by the 2000s. By the time they entered the workforce, everything had already started shifting. Tuition was skyrocketing, unions were shrinking, and the promise of a stable career was already cracking. They were sold the college dream. Take on that debt now and it'll all pay off later. But the timing was brutal. College debt was climbing, not yet a full-blown crisis like the Millennials faced, but just enough to start dragging Gen X down. Gen X graduated into recessions, watched the dot-com bubble burst, and hit their prime earning years just in time for the 2008 crash. Every financial milestone turned into a moving target. Millions saw their homes turn from nest eggs into debt traps overnight. This generation got whiplash from the economy before they even turned 40. So they adapted. Gen X became the original masters of the side hustle, the freelance grind, the constant pivot. They learned not to expect loyalty from employers because they'd never seen it modeled. Job hopping wasn't a red flag for them, it was a survival strategy. Most of them don't have pensions, they've got 401ks if they were lucky enough to contribute consistently through recessions, layoffs, caregiver gaps, and rising costs. Healthcare costs surge, hitting Gen X just as caregiving for aging parents became unavoidable. Housing? Well, either priced out or locked into a home that they can't afford to leave. And they're stuck in the middle, still raising kids, now caring for their aging parents, all while being quietly aged out of the jobs they fought so hard to keep. And they're complaining, but it's not the loud, organized rage of boomers or the online protest culture of the millennials. It's a tired, bitter, resigned kind of outrage. They've seen this before. They've watched the system screw their parents, and now it's circling back for them. And yeah, that's me. That's me. I'm not just observing this from the sidelines. I am Gen X, and I've got the layoff papers and the late night panic attacks to prove it. If there was ever a map, yeah, mine must have been destroyed when I was 45, because starting over with nothing but a resume, a migraine, and a LinkedIn login, that sure as hell wasn't in the brochure. Now, most of us are still working because we have to. Retirement feels less like a finish line and more like a punchline. We're too young for Social Security and too old for hiring managers, and we're too broke to stop. Aging hasn't brought rest. It just made everything cost more. Gen X was the first generation to watch the system fail in real time, and the first with the tech to talk about it publicly. But even then, the platforms were young, fragmented, and easy to ignore. The real floodgates didn't open until millennials brought rage into the algorithm. Yeah, Gen X cracked open the door and millennials kicked it off its hinges. Millennials were born between 1981 and 1996, which means that they're in their 30s to mid-40s now, edging right into that danger zone where every generation before them got pushed out. They haven't reached the cliff yet, but they can see the bodies. This is the generation that got sold the dream in high res, right? Follow your passion, take out the loans, get the degree. Everything will work out, especially in the digital age. You're the future. The system said debt is temporary, opportunity is unlimited, trust us. So they did. They signed on for massive student loans, walked into college just as tuition explodes, and graduated into a financial collapse that wipes out entry-level jobs and kneecaps their earning power before they even got started. And let's be honest, it wasn't just optimism that got them there. It was pressure. Pressure from parents, schools, society. Go to college or you'll end up flipping burgers, right? Nobody mentioned that flipping burgers might actually pay better than entry-level jobs. Then came the student debt crisis, absurd housing costs, and a gig economy that was marketed as freedom but delivered zero stability. Flexibility is great until you realize that it means zero benefit, zero safety net, and zero chance at retirement. They adapted. They moved home. They delayed marriage, put off kids, chose experiences over stuff, not because it was trendy, but because it was a survival tactic. And just as things were stabilizing, the pandemic hit. Layoffs, burnout, career changes that weren't planned but forced, rising housing costs, healthcare becoming unaffordable even with insurance, and inflation eating every dollar that they managed to save. By the time the millennials hit their 50s, the excuses will be different, but the message will still be the same. You're too expensive, you're not a culture fit, we're going in a new direction. Millennials grow up fully online, which means they don't just feel the collapse, they watch it happen in real time. Every mass layoff trend, every job post that age filters without saying it, every study showing workers over 50 getting ghosted again. It's not just whispered behind closed doors, it's live streamed. Millennials didn't age into instability. They started there and never got out. Retirement feels like science fiction. Homeownership for them is a fantasy. Healthcare is a crisis. Honestly, millennials should have been handed capes at their graduation because surviving this mess is a full-time hero arc. Except instead of superpowers, they got burnout, bad credit, and a $2,500 a month studio with black mold, exposed pipes, and a lot of character. And even now, in their prime working years, they're exhausted, underpaid, and out of options. The system taught them to hustle, adapt, and stay grateful, but aging in this system won't mean slowing down. It'll mean bracing for impact with nothing to catch them. And the generation coming up behind them, they're not waiting to get bonked on the head. They're already ducking. Gen Z was born between 1997 and 2012, which means they're still in their teens to mid-20s right now. They're not hitting their 50s anytime soon, but they're already living through a faster, sharper version of the same system that gutted the generations before them. They watched millennials get wrecked by student debt and burnout and broken promises. So they came in skeptical. They didn't expect loyalty to be rewarded. They didn't believe in staying at one job for 30 years. Instead, they were told, monetize your hobbies, build a personal brand, skip that 9 to 5. Which sounds empowering until you realize that monetizing your hobbies is just code for work every second of your life and pretend it's your passion. But under all that glossy independence talk is the same old scam, just digitized. The job market is more fragmented than ever, wages aren't keeping up, rent is brutal, and job security doesn't exist. Most Gen Z workers bounce between gigs, short contracts, and side hustles, chasing just enough income to survive while telling themselves that it's freedom. They entered the workforce during a pandemic, they came of age during a mental health crisis, and now they're competing against AI while trying to pay off student loans that they were told would be worth it. Some skipped college altogether, not because they were rebels, but because they saw the ROI tank for everyone ahead of them. This generation is fluent in the language of burnout, precarity, and systemic failure. They're cynical, sharp, and incredibly online. They've seen the push out in real time, watching their parents or older coworkers get ghosted, laid off, or passed over. They know it's coming. And here's the terrifying part. It might come for them faster because in a world driven by trends, automation, and constantly shifting algorithms, too old could hit long before 30. In tech, media, and entertainment, Gen Zers are already being told that they're out of touch at 25 years old. And sure, they're loud. They're meme literate. They know the scam better than anyone, but naming it isn't the same as stopping it. Awareness isn't armor. Knowing the house is on fire doesn't mean that you're going to get out alive, especially if the exits are locked behind a paywall. Unless this generation figures out how to organize, not just go viral, they're headed for the same fate as everyone else. Chewed up at midlife, replaced for profit, and told it's just the way things work. Gen Z sees the scam clearly, but clarity alone won't save them. And that's what scares me the most. They're walking in with their eyes open and the system is still chewing them up. At least the rest of us had an illusion. Gen Z didn't even get dinner and a drink first. If nothing changes, they won't get pushed out at midlife. They'll never even get in the door. Here's a question. If every generation gets betrayed, how the hell does this scam keep working? What is it about this system that makes collapse feel like tradition? Every generation is promised a path to success, right? Go to school, get the job, play by the rules, and you'll be fine. And every generation believes it until midlife hits, and suddenly you're a problem to be managed. The dream changes. Pensions, 401ks, personal brands, but the cycle doesn't. You give your best years to a system that tells you you're building something, then one day you're too experienced, too expensive, and too hard to control. One reason the cycle keeps rolling is the muscle behind worker protections, unions, got completely gutted. Membership fell hard starting in the 80s. What used to be negotiated is now optional, gamified, or completely gone. But here's what makes the betrayal worse. It wasn't always like this. From the end of World War II through the 1970s, something rare happened in America. Productivity and wages rose together. That meant when workers built more, they earned more. It's what created the middle class as we know it. The escalator worked. If you showed up, clocked in, and you did your job, you could expect a better life than your parents had. Then around 1979, the gears shifted. Wages flatlined. Productivity kept rising, but the money, it stopped going to the people doing the work. That gap between what we produce and what we earn, that's not accidental. That's profit siphoned straight to the top, and it's been growing for over 40 years. So when people say just work hard and it'll pay off, they're quoting a system that hasn't existed since bell bottoms were in style. The first time. And we believed it. I believed it. I kept my head down, took on debt, hustled, and when it all went sideways, I thought that I'd messed up because nobody tells you that the system's changed, not you. So, who decides that 50 is past your prime and who benefits when experience starts looking like a liability? There's not just like a villain sitting in a back room somewhere, right? It is a machine built on aligned incentives. Businesses want cheap, replaceable labor. Governments want economic growth. Both benefit when you're productive, compliant, and not asking too many questions. Corporations push the narrative because it serves their bottom line. Loyalty keeps turnover low. Ambition drives overwork. Fear keeps wages down. And when you're no longer profitable, you're off the ledger. And when you speak up about it, the defense is always the same. This isn't new. It happened to our parents too. Like that somehow makes it acceptable. Like getting discarded is just a rite of passage instead of a rigged outcome. That's why the cycle keeps repeating, because it's profitable. It's all about money. It's convenient because it gives the illusion of progress while delivering the same outcome every single time. So no. It's not a coincidence. It's not just how it's always been. It's a playbook, one that gets passed down, polished up, and resold to every new generation until we stop playing along. It doesn't matter if the dream is a pension, 401k, or viral fame on TikTok. Every generation gets handed a new version of the same old promise, just long enough to keep chasing it. Then midlife comes and the rug gets yanked. That's not progress. That's the same scam in a new outfit. Unless we name it for what it is, unless we stop acting like this is just how the world works, it's going to keep happening over and over again until we're the ones telling the next generation, this isn't new. It's always been like this. And then watching them get chewed up the exact same way. All right, so 8 generations, same rug. Has anything actually gotten better? You'd think that by now we'd have figured something out. And sure, we've seen some progress. We've got Social Security, Medicare, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. There's a few unions that still have teeth, and there's a few companies that still pretend like they actually care. But the big picture, the structure hasn't changed. The incentives haven't changed, and the outcomes sure as hell haven't changed. Social Security was a lifeline, but it was never enough to live on, and it may not even be around much longer. Medicare helps, but only if you can hang on until you're 65 without losing everything first. And the discrimination laws, they're a formality. They're easy to bypass, hard to enforce. The burden is always on the person getting pushed out. Companies have gotten smarter. They don't say you're too old. They say we're restructuring, right? HR departments don't fight for workers. They manage liability. And the politicians, they toss out promises when it polls well, but when the pressure hits, corporate profits, campaign donors, economic downturns, those promises fold like a cheap suit. Because there's no real protection, just spin. And the ones who get hit the hardest, the ones who kept the lights on, the ones who worked through the chaos, raised family, paid taxes, trained the new hires, they're the first to go when the system decides they cost too much. So no, It doesn't just magically get better, not unless we stop recycling the same hope with a new buzzword and actually start demanding something different. So, if the safety nets are flimsy, the laws are toothless, and the outcomes haven't changed, what the hell would it take? Because hope as a strategy isn't working out so well for us. Now, I'm no expert, but what would actually change the game? Not another LinkedIn post about lifelong learning, not another resume workshop, not another motivational speaker telling you to reinvent yourself after a layoff like it's some kind of growth opportunity. It starts with the basics. God, enforce the damn laws. Age discrimination is illegal, but we treat it like it's just bad manners. If companies knew that there were real financial consequences for pushing out experienced workers, they'd stop or at least think twice. They don't care about fairness, they care about risk. And it's not just about stopping harm, it's about building in protection. Retirement security shouldn't depend on how well you guess the market in your 30s. Health insurance should not be tied to employment when the system is designed to cut you loose right when your medical costs go up. We need universal health care so employment doesn't hold your survival hostage. Your job shouldn't decide whether you live or die. We need policy that recognizes midlife not as a decline, but as peak contribution. Tax incentives for retaining older workers, mandated severance for layoffs of people over 50, portable benefits that move with you, not your job title. Pay transparency, prove it or pay it age discrimination enforcement. And let's stop acting like layoffs are natural disasters. They're choices made by people who are somehow the ones that are never laid off. And maybe most importantly, stop letting corporations write all the rules. Stop pretending market efficiency justifies human discard. If we can regulate air quality and building codes, we can regulate workforce exploitation. This isn't about sympathy, it's about accountability. If you can't build a business model without burning through people and tossing them aside, maybe you don't have a business model worth protecting. We don't need another awareness campaign. We need pressure, policy, and a public that stops nodding along to the lie that being replaced is just part of growing up. And more than anything, we need to stop swallowing this lie that this is just how it is, because that lie has been sold to every single generation. And every single generation got burned by it. So if the system won't save us, what the hell can we do now? If you're in your 50s right now and feeling discarded, this isn't a personal failure. It's a pattern, right? Engineered. And it's happened over and over again. This doesn't change unless we start treating it like a movement. And no, that doesn't mean building a new startup that reinvents employment. We've tried that. It's called freelancing, and it sucks. Unless we stop whispering and start calling it what it is, right? Economic disposability wrapped in generational gaslighting. Talk about it, post about it, organize around it, push for laws that actually protect people instead of pretending discrimination doesn't exist just because it's hard to prove in court. Because if we don't, 30 years from now, we'll be watching Gen Z get tossed out with the same excuses, just dressed up in a new language and probably filtered through AI. This isn't a glitch, it's the system. This is the system. Sell the dream, bleed the worker, discard the body, and call it tradition. Call it progress. Just don't call it acceptable. Can you see why things are the way that they are? It's not a coincidence. It's not bad luck. It is a blueprint. And most of us didn't see it until we were halfway through building our lives on top of it. So, if we're tired of chasing the same damn carrot, maybe it's time to burn the stick. Because here's the thing. Getting pushed out at 50, that's just one phase of the con. The real damage starts earlier, when you're replaced by a contract overseas, when your whole department disappears without warning, when your paycheck vanishes but the execs still seem to be able to cash theirs. If you want to understand how deep this rabbit hole goes, you need to look at who's actually making those decisions and how outsourcing has turned your job into a line item. I break it all down right here. Because it's not just about jobs leaving, it's about being sold out. Quietly, efficiently, and permanently.